This dude is 6'7", 6'7", TikTok trend there. I apologize for referencing that, but he's 6'7", 265 pounds.
All right, everybody, welcome back. As always, I am your party host, Joe Rivera, and along with me is a fantasy know-it-all of some sorts, Jacob Camenker. Jacob, we've made it to week 7, right? It's kind of turned into a war of attrition for lots of fantasy managers around their respective fantasy leagues. Lots of injuries to deal with, but more importantly, trade deadlines coming around. You have any advice for fantasy managers maybe look to swing some deals in the coming week?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the injuries, Joe. If you have an injured player and you are outside the playoff picture, you have a losing record, you got to try to offload them if you can. I think a good example of this is Bucky Irving. We don't know when he's going to be back. My kind of estimation is he might not be back until after the week 10 bye. If you're a fantasy owner that's sitting at 1-5 or 2-4 at this point, you got to try to offload him for some current assets that are going to help you. And then meanwhile, if you're a fantasy owner with a good record, you should be buying low on some of those injured guys and trying to get them on your roster at a cheap cost, upgrade your playoff potential rosters. So I think any trades right now, you got to look at the injury situation and just try to take advantage of a deal, whether it's on the side of, buying low on an injured guy or just selling them to get them off your roster and give yourself some other options at those positions.
Jacob, as a fantasy manager yourself, what's the key to making a good fantasy deal? Like, and not just talking about trying to swindle or screw your league mates, but what's the science that goes into making a good deal?
Yeah, so I have a reputation. I live in Boston, so I take kind of a page out of Danny Ainge's playbook where you have to win the trade, which doesn't always win me a lot of love in fantasy leagues because I tend to end up making bad offers. So my best advice to everyone is look at trade value charts, kind of assess the deal from both sides. You don't want to propose a deal to someone that's just ridiculous or that has no chance of being accepted just because you're saying, oh, I want to be interested in this guy, but I don't want to, give up too much for him. Make a reasonable offer to them, see if they bite. If they don't, then just talk about potential other options for them. But the key is not to lowball the opposing manager, because if you do that, odds are they're not going to want to trade with you.
Hmm. All right, Jacob, let's get into your week 7 sleeper picks. Now, we know the Buccaneers have dealt with a ton of injuries this year. You mentioned Bucky Irving, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, most recently in week 6, Emeka Egbuka. So for Baker Mayfield, that's tough, but for fantasy managers, that's even tougher. But I know you got a sleeper pick out there for fantasy managers looking to make an impact this week.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tez Johnson this week for the Buccaneers. He's a young wide receiver, 7th-round rookie out of Oregon. He caught a 45-yard touchdown last week, and I think his role in this offense is only going to grow with Ibuka out of action. Chris Godwin's probably going to be out this week. Mike Evans is a maybe to play, but, again, they have that week 9 bye looming, so I don't think they're going to try to rush him back. So Johnson's going to get reps against the Lions no matter what. And Detroit's secondary is completely decimated right now, Joe. They're missing 5 of their top 6 cornerbacks from their week 1 roster, I believe. And they're going to be without safety Brian Branch, who got suspended. He's appealing that suspension, but I don't anticipate that being overturned. So Tez Johnson, he's got sky-high potential, and he's a deep threat. So he could end up popping off in this game.
All right, Jacob, let's head out to Pittsburgh and an interesting target for Aaron Rodgers this week, a sleeper pick for the Steelers. Who do you got this week?
Okay, so this is a guy who I loved during his draft year, Joe, and he hasn't really gotten a ton of opportunities in Pittsburgh playing behind Pat Fryermuth, but Arthur Smith is leaning into using Darnell Washington more. This dude is 6'7", 6'7", TikTok trend there. I apologize for referencing that, but he's 6'7", 265 pounds. He's made 3 catches in back-to-back games. He's facing a Bengals defense that's allowed 5 touchdowns to tight ends this year. That's second most in the NFL. This dude's size alone makes him a massive red zone threat. Aaron Rodgers loves to throw the ball short. So if you're talking about getting in that, like, inside the 10-yard line, you're looking to throw a pass, Darnell Washington has such high touchdown upside. I want him in my lineups this week. It's just such a good matchup. And I think by the end of the year, he might end up being a top 10 fantasy tight end solely because of his touchdown potential.
Aaron Rodgers, you mentioned his average depth of target this year, 5.8 yards, which is the lowest in the NFL amongst a certain PFF filter that I put in there. But that's not great. But if you're looking for a guy to get the ball out to, dump him down deep, dump him down short, Darnell Washington might be your guy. All right, Jacob, let's head out to Tennessee. And the Titans made a coaching change this week, deciding to move on from Brian Callahan. But how is that going to affect the offense in a certain sleeper pick you have?
Yeah, I think Ty J. Spears might end up more involved with this offense as they try to kind of jumpstart it and get Cam Ward some help. Tony Pollard's been okay this season, but I kind of think he could potentially emerge as a trade target because so many teams are looking for running backs out there and veteran running backs. Spears is an explosive playmaker. He's shown that in his limited playing time in the NFL, and he had 9 touches for 50 yards against the Raiders. The most encouraging thing for fantasy managers, though, he had 4 catches. Granted, he only turned them into 19 yards, but if you're in a half PPR or PPR league and you're seeing Spears put up those kinds of check down catch numbers, that's encouraging because that could put him in that sort of low end flex range each week. And if he gets more work, he didn't have a lot of carries. He only had 5 against the Raiders, but he was more efficient than Pollard. So if he gets a chance to, handle 10, 15 touches a game, we're going to be talking about him as a flex week in and week out. And then if Tony Pollard does end up getting traded, Spears would be the lead back there. So I like his long term upside. And look, the Patriots are good against the run, but they'll allow him to catch some passes. So feel free to plug him in this week if you need to.
All right, Jacob, let's move out to New England. Another sleeper pick you have here, and that's Kayshon Boutte for the Patriots. I know you're big Pats guy. It's okay to admit Drake May has looked very good this year. Why is Boutte a sleeper pick of yours this week?
Yeah, so Booty, he kind of strikes a lot of people as a boomer bust flex option, but his downfield pass catching ability is really second to none right now. He has a perfect passer rated when targeted on throws of 20 plus yards this year. I believe he has something like 6 catches for 137 yards and 3 touchdowns on deep passes this year, which is really unbelievable. So Drake May has been looking his way often enough. We kind of saw that connection shine through against the Saints. So I like the idea of kind of backing Booty. He's probably their number 2 receiver, and he's a big play guy against a discombobulated Titans team. So I am willing to back him in this spot and say, hey, maybe he doesn't get that long catch that makes him fantasy relevant, but if he gets 2, he could end up winning you the week.
You heard it here first, everybody. Jacob Camenker is backing Boutte in week 7.